America, welcome into the Business Pulse, brought to you by the Freedom Chamber, online at freedomchamber.net, the pro-American business network. Joined by the usual suspects and friends of mine, Rod Martin, Dean Owen, and we're bringing in executive producer Mike Likens because all of us here at the Freedom Chamber, Freedom Square, 13 Stripes Digital Media have an incredibly heavy hearts over the past week. And I think it's always a great thing and therapeutic to talk about things and talk about how we're feeling. We all knew Charlie on some level, some deeper than others. I've had a relationship with Charlie since about 2012, right when Turning Point USA was just starting to become a thing and take off, and never imagined where we'd be right now. That's for gosh darn sure. So, Ron, I'd like to start with you. You knew Charlie. I'd love to get your thoughts, feelings, and of course, your insight to what Charlie means to you and how we move forward without Charlie.
Well, first and foremost, my condolences to his sweet little family. He was 31 years old, had a beautiful wife and children, and they are without a husband and a daddy. And it's just horrifying, and it's so very, very wrong. Charlie was utterly gifted. He's a college dropout, but he knew more than a lot of college professors on a lot of topics. He's absolutely one of the most extraordinary organizational entrepreneurs of our time, unquestionably one of the true greats. I would say that in a decade's time, he accomplished more in some respects than even Saul Alinsky on the left, and certainly with a much more moral worldview. Somewhere along the way, Charlie became very open about his faith. I really don't know when Charlie became a Christian, but I know when he started talking about it a lot. And it was absolutely transformative. These last 5 years or so, he has probably led more people to Christ or attempted to do so than most pastors will in their lifetime. And just boldly proclaiming the word. And that should matter to our secular friends too. Tim Kaine was in a Senate hearing the other day, just besmirching the idea that our rights come from government, or that come from God and not government. He's like, well, anybody who believes that is just basically the Ayatollah. Well, first of all, the Ayatollah doesn't believe that. The Ayatollah believes that everything you have comes from him. And so does Tim Kaine. And that's the socialist worldview, that whoever has the most power gets to define right and wrong, and therefore they want power. And that's just not our view. And that's the most important thing, I think, for the society as a whole, aside from just the sharing of the gospel that Charlie did. He really made people deeply understand that rights have to come from a higher source than a transient government that can be and is often corrupt. And he just hammered that home. His focus on the gospel made it make sense. And it did make sense, and it does make sense to a ton of people his age and younger who traditionally would be leftists, traditionally would be abandoning the church, and in fact now are flooding into the church, and on the Gen Z men side actually are majority Republican. I don't know of any time in American history where a majority of the young was with the conservatives. And we owe that to Charlie Kirk more than any other person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You hit the nail right on the head there. Thank you for that, Rod. Mr. Owen.
Well, what struck me about Charlie, I only met him once, and it was at a Bible college, and just in passing. But we're taught to love people where they are, to love everyone, but to call out evil, and that's a really hard thing to do. We try, we work at it, but Charlie just had an absolute knack for that. And when I would see him do that, and he would very forcefully call out evil, but he also met the person with love. And that was just a skill set that, when I think of what Jesus Christ looked like when he was at the stoning of the prostitute, and he said, let he that is without sin cast the first stone. And then he turned to the prostitute and said, go and sin no more. Charlie was the epitome of that. That was the image I had. It was the image that was Charlie. That's the way my mind interpreted that. He was just so gifted at that. And to be able to speak common sense to evil and to call it out and to change minds and change perspectives and to do it with reason and with logic and without malice. And there are so many of us on the right there are so many of us that could learn from that model that you teach with love. And he did, but he didn't back away from the heavy topics that are so emotionally charged. So, just truly one of the greats. In a newsletter, I talked about, of course, that last week we were on, and the young lady from Ukraine and how devastating that is. And, how do our hearts not bleed for those families, those children? But, and of course, last week was also September 11th. And after those events, I lost a lot of my brothers in the subsequent wars. And, so you just had all that going on last week, and there's still some blowover to this week. And, but then I remember something. September 11th, 2001, the 9/11, the terrorist attacks, the stock market went down. But after just 4 trading days, there was September 17th, and the stock market opened back up. It took Herculean efforts. It took Herculean people to do Herculean things to get that market back open. And yeah, we went through a very difficult trading period, but we did open back up. We did rise. And the comment I made in my newsletter was that Satan saw us on our knees and he thought he won until he heard us say amen. And that's the only way I know to proceed forward with Charlie's loss. We have to, yes, get on our knees, but when we're getting up, make sure we say amen.
Absolutely. Dean, thank you for sharing. Executive producer Mike Likens, you've met Charlie a couple times. We've worked on projects together with Turning Point USA, Turning Point Action. I always would tell Mike, because Mike really got into the political pool in the freedom movement about 5-6 years ago when we founded Freedom Square. And I always would look over at him. I said, would you ever thought you'd be here? Did you ever think you'd be here doing this right now with these great Americans? And one of them was Charlie Kirk, a great friend of ours. And Mike, I welcome your thoughts inside the Business Pulse.
Yeah, I echo what Rod had said. I think the biggest thing that I've learned from just this past week and listening to a lot of the commentary that's gone on, I think more than anything, I thought I knew Charlie. I thought I knew, because we've worked with him and his team and the Turning Point group, and we've been to many of the events that they've through Turning Point Action and Turning Point Faith and America Fest, and but that was just events that happened. But to actually see an intimate view of where he loved to be the most, and that was on a college campus with the table, being a pastor to all these kids. And it's so humbling to really watch him work and see these kids who walk up to the mic and think they're going to, destroy him or, come at it with evil and with disgust, and they end up leaving in tears or a feeling of maybe I am wrong. And the biggest line that I've heard him say over and over again is that when we stop debating, when we stop talking, that's when evil wins. That's when violence happens. And he's exactly right. We all just need to be that Charlie. We need to be that, showing that compassion, and the divide that's out there right now is so thick. So that's my two thoughts.
Well,
Well,
I thank you for that, Mike. And one of the things that I saw on social media and I've seen quite a bit is, they silenced Charlie because he was speaking, but more importantly, they silenced him because the kids were listening. And I think that needs to ring true as we move this forward. And they've created millions of Charlie Kirks now. And I truly believe you're going to see a huge tsunami of people back to church. I can tell you this much: churches were filled around my part of the world on Sunday. There were pastors that did speak up, but there are also pastors and ministers that did not speak up. And those pastors and ministers need to be talked to about that. So we can go around the horn one more time, Rod, because we could probably go for days talking about the great work that Charlie Kirk did along with Turning Point, and God bless Erica and those two babies. It just breaks my heart. But Rod, I'll turn it back to you.
Well, I assume we're going to have a break here in a minute, so I'm just going to be brief, but
Yes,
I
sir.
think it is vital that we draw a bright line distinction between violent disagreement and violence. And this is what Charlie exemplified. He went into places that weren't welcoming, and he had conversations with people who didn't want to have conversations with him necessarily unless they were trying to beat him. But he reached out anyway. He treated them as fellow brothers in humanity. He treated them as image bearers of God the Father, and he discussed. They didn't always agree. They frequently didn't agree. Man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. But if you have the discussion, you can find common ground. This is a crucial point for some of our friends, especially some of our libertarian friends this week, who are like, well, if they dismiss those teachers in Texas who have cheered his death or encouraged their students to engage in political violence, that's just cancel culture. No, it is not. The founding fathers believed in what they called ordered liberty. And if you don't have certain boundaries around discourse, discourse becomes impossible. If there's a good chance that you're going to be murdered for what you say, you're likely not to say it. And that's when tyranny really takes over. So we can't just dismiss this as, oh, bad things happen. Oh, that's another tragedy. No, this is, forgive the term, a turning point in which our FBI is going to have to put its counterintelligence hat back on, and we're going to have to root out these networks of funders and trainers who are inciting violence across this country. And I just end that with, we have a week now since Charlie was murdered, and no cities have burned down, no Teslas have been firebombed, no revenge killings, snipers in Dallas killing cops because BLM's mad. None of this. The right has had prayer vigils. The right has come together and grieved, and that is a huge, huge difference. Don't miss it. The whataboutism, the both sides do it. So, no, they actually don't. Historically, that's just not true.
Amen. Dean, I'll give you the final thought as we're up against a hard break here, bud.
Yeah, I echo everything Rod said, but then, we are not the same. You look at the way we react and the way we talk about these things. And, if there had been thoughtful dialogue after Rodney King, after George Floyd, things would be different. But there wasn't. And now we're trying to have that rational thought. I hope Charlie was right, that he can reason and we can get to a reasoned debate and change minds and bring about unity. I hope he was right. But, I did see something, and it hurts my heart to say it, but, I saw something on an X post that Charlie thought he could reason with the left. They proved him wrong.
Yes, they did. We're going to take a break, and we just once again thank you to everything Charlie blessed us with, and God bless Erica and those baby girls, and God bless you, Charlie. Thank you for everything you did for us, and we promise you this: we will keep the torch lit and burning bright. On the other side of
Yes,
the break, we're going to talk about what the feds just did. Hang on, you're inside the Business Pulse.
Hey, the Freedom Chamber is amazing. I'm so glad that we get to be here on the Freedom Chamber's Business Pulse. This is an organization you should support. It's an organization of which you should be a member. The Freedom Chamber is getting important things done in this country. And honestly, we need spaces for people who believe the sorts of things that if you're watching this, you probably do. We have gone through this extended period of not just canceling individuals, but just boycotting businesses and doing terrible things, debanking. Nigel Farage, who is likely to be the next prime minister of the United Kingdom, was actually debanked by all the major banks in the United Kingdom. And of course that happens here, and we get de-insured and all these terrible things. The Freedom Chamber is fighting for you. The Freedom Chamber is here to make sure that you're protected, that your values matter, they count, and they're in the public square. So I encourage everybody to join the Freedom Chamber.
Welcome back inside the Business Pulse with Rod Martin and Dean Owen. I'm Chuck Barham. The feds have done it, Dean. The feds have done it. They've cut the interest rates by 1/4 point. What does it mean? Should it have been a 1/2 point? Will we see a stimulation in the economy? Your thoughts?
I believe it should have been at least a 1/2 point. We're still far, far behind. Our president was right months ago when he said the Fed was far behind the curve. I think they're still far behind the curve. It's still politicized, but it gets to a point where they can't play politics continuously and not do anything. So, the last week we talked about the revised job report. We talked about the inflation numbers. We talked about we're not seeing this horrible systematic inflation coming from tariffs. And we're seeing the housing market with, record levels of inventory, where just a few years ago there was record shortages of housing. You got lots of things going on. This will provide a little bit of stimulus to the economy. Normally it's going to take 6 months, but something's positive is normally when the Fed starts its rate cutting cycle, we see good returns in our markets. We see good returns in our economy. I think we've got a long way to go. I think interest rates are still about at least 1.5% too high, maybe as much as 2%. So we've got a long way to go, but at least it's a first step.
I understand the desire to taper, but the truth is I'm actually a little harder core on this even than Dean, if that's possible. I think we're 300 basis points too high as we went into this FOMC meeting, and at least 200. So at least, Dean's number, but it's just ludicrous where we are. We've got one of the highest interest rates in the industrialized world. It is absolutely absurd. There are third world countries that are lower than the United States in what is frankly a supply side boom. And Kevin Hassett, who my money's on to be our next Fed chairman, Kevin Hassett was on Kudlow yesterday and just did a bang up job of showing, look, this is a supply side boom. You're not going to see that pick up in employment initially because you've got to have some spending to create those jobs first. But if you want to completely drag the economy down, just keep interest rates too high. Make it impossible for young people to buy houses. Make it impossible for young people to find good paying jobs. And that's what they've been doing. And we've seen now very clearly, BLS last week demonstrated painfully clearly that the entire machinery of government has been horribly politicized and for very specific partisan purposes. They invented 1 million jobs that didn't exist to help Biden-Harris, and the Fed's numbers are worse than the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So that's actually the biggest single reason my money's on Hassett, because I believe Donald Trump knows that Kevin Hassett will go in and clean house and do the structural reform at the Fed to get us a much, much better central bank, certainly a much more honest central bank, and end what Scott Bessent keeps calling gain of function monetary policy. It's got to stop. And just one last thing on that. on rodmartin.org this afternoon, we are publishing an article by Scott Bessent about what's wrong with the Fed and how it needs to be reformed. I certainly believe that we would be better off without a central bank, but since we have one and we're not getting rid of it, we really do need some fundamental reform, and I think Bessent's on the right track.
Do you see another rate cut before the holidays? Another half point or a quarter?
Yes, I absolutely do. I think they will taper down between 100 and 200 basis points. They really ought to go 300, and maybe they will after Hassett is chairman.
Yeah. Dean, I'll give you the final thoughts on this as we wrap up this
Well,
segment.
Marcus, as of yesterday, we're at 96% on a quarter point today. There's still very high odds that we're going to see potentially. The question is really, do we get one more or two more before the end of the year? That's the real question. I think it is setting up for what may be a very nice scenario where we get through this economic malaise and blah period that we're going through with the job market, and we set up next year for a really good economy, which speaks well to the midterms for GOP and Republican Party. And with all the other changes, I think we may actually see a true turning point in this country, not only from our society, but from our economic standpoint. And we put this nation back where it needs to be and let America be the shining city on the hill.
Absolutely. Dean, where can people find you online, buddy?
OwenCPA.com. That's OWENCPA.com. Jump online, connect with my team. We'll get you a newsletter. The newsletter's very, very informational. We're not trying to spam people. We're not trying to put out propaganda. We're trying to put out truth. And how do you save taxes and minimize your tax bill and navigate the economy as we're going through and run your business better? So jump online. It's free. And let's stay connected. And maybe when you need us, you'll call us.
And if I didn't give you 2 thumbs up for that big, beautiful sign behind you, I'm doing it right now. I love the sign. Great job on that, Dean. Rod Martin, The Martin Report. Where can people jump online and find you?
Come to rodmartin.org. We do daily geopolitical analysis across a range of issues around the world, including economics and legal. Same analysis we use at Martin Capital. And subscribe there, but also follow us on X. We're at 276,000 followers on X, and it's just growing like gangbusters.
Love that. Love that. Gentlemen, I appreciate everything you bring to the table here. I appreciate your thoughts and your open hearts about Charlie Kirk as we move this country forward. We're in a good spot. I think it's going to be a lot better come after 2026, as Dean and Rod alluded to. So God bless Charlie Kirk. God bless his family. And God bless America. This has been the Business Pulse.
My name is Dean Owen. I'm a CPA. I have a master's degree in taxation and a personal financial specialist. Tax laws are always changing. That's why you need a tax strategist, not just a tax preparer. You need someone to help you pay the least amount of tax legally. Because if your business and retirement tax planning is not tax smart, it's probably tax dumb. Let's fix that today. Call me. Let's disinherit the government and not your kids. That's what my team and I do. This is who we are. I'm a combat veteran, unapologetically American, unapologetically pro-God, pro-life, and pro-Second Amendment. If those are the values you seek in a tax and money advisor, call us. Again, let's disinherit the government and not your kids. We're not afraid to share our values, and we share them with you.